Welcome back to The Explainer. So, if you love getting straight to the heart of complex history, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating pieces of political literature ever created. Imagine for a second that you're Emperor Augustus, right? You've just consolidated power, you've transformed Roman Republic into an empire, and now you need a massive, undeniable PR campaign to legitimize your rule. I mean, you need a campaign so huge it makes a modern presidential election look like a local bake sale. You need a story so grand that it makes the rise of Rome seem completely inevitable, literally ordained by the gods. Well, to understand exactly how he pulled this off, we have to look at the absolute masterpiece he commissioned. How do you invent a history for the world's greatest empire? It's a pretty monumental challenge, isn't it? The answer actually came from a brilliant poet named Virgil. Between 29 and 19 BC, Virgil was handed this seemingly impossible task: write a foundational myth that would cement Rome's legacy forever. The result? The Aeneid. It's an epic poem following the incredible journey of a Trojan prince named Aeneas. He's a survivor of the devastating Trojan War who's basically destined to become the mythical ancestor of the entire Roman people. But to truly grasp the sheer scale of what Virgil was attempting here, we've got to look at his competition. And this brilliantly illustrates the intense cultural rivalry at play here. For centuries, the Greek epics of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, they were the absolute gold standard of heroic storytelling. Rome had conquered Greece militarily, sure, but culturally, they were definitely still living in Homer's shadow. So Virgil's Aeneid was Rome's commissioned attempt to create an equally grand, divine origin story that didn't just match the Greeks, but culturally eclipsed them. He needed a hero to rival Achilles and Odysseus, but one packed with uniquely Roman virtues. Section 1. Escape from burning Troy. Our story begins in the ashes of a fallen world. It kicks off an ultimate superhero origin story that's born out of just utter destruction and despair. To hook his audience right from the jump, Virgil uses a classic literary technique, in media res, which basically means opening right in the middle of the action. We don't get a slow, gentle build-up here. Instead, boom, we're thrust right into a terrifying, violent storm at sea. Aeneas and his surviving fleet are just getting battered by these massive waves, a deadly tempest whipped up by the goddess Juno. And Juno holds a deeply rooted, bitter grudge against the Trojans. So right away, our hero is exhausted, battered, and seemingly at the complete mercy of a hostile universe. But they do survive the storm, and the Trojans wash ashore in North Africa. There, they're welcomed by Queen Dido, the ruler of Carthage. She recognizes the nobility of her unexpected guests and throws this lavish royal banquet in their honor. And it's right here, amidst all the feasting, that she asks Aeneas to recount the tragic fall of his home city. Aeneas essentially becomes the narrator of his own tragic backstory, which sets up this massive, heartbreaking flashback for us. Okay, let's dive into this sequence of events, because it is absolutely legendary. First, we have the wooden horse. After a 10-year stalemate, the Greeks pretend to retreat and they leave behind this giant wooden horse. Despite the desperate warnings of a Trojan priest named Laocoon, the Trojans are tricked. They pull it right inside their unbreachable walls. Second, the midnight sock. Under the cover of darkness, Greek warriors just pour out of the horse, open the gates, and slaughter the city. In the middle of all this chaos, Aeneas is visited in a dream by the ghost of the great warrior Hector, who delivers a chilling message. Troy is doomed. He commands Aeneas to flee and found a new city. And that leads us to step 3, the desperate escape to Mount Ida. But pay close attention to exactly who Aeneas brings with him in this escape. It's this beautifully constructed image of duty. He doesn't just run for his life. He literally carries his elderly, frail father, Anchises, on his back, which represents carrying the weight of the past. He holds the hand of his young son Ascanius, representing the hope of the future. But tragically, in the smoke and the sheer chaos of the escape, he loses his wife Creusa. Her death is this heartbreaking sacrifice that severs his final tie to Troy. Leading the surviving refugees, who become known as the Aeneadae, Aeneas is now completely bound by a divine destiny, build some ships, and seek out a new home in a distant land called Italy. Moving on to Section 2, Love, Duty, and Curses. The journey to Italy is far from straightforward. The tone of the story really shifts here from a grim tragedy of war into a sweeping, romantic, and incredibly dangerous adventure. Let's trace this absolutely arduous island-hopping voyage across the Mediterranean. Fleeing the ruins of Troy, Aeneas and his fleet just endure trial after terrifying trial. I mean, they face monstrous creatures like the Harpies, they have to navigate treacherous waters, and they suffer immense personal losses, including the tragic death of Aeneas' father, Anchises, in Sicily. They're constantly, desperately searching for Hesperia, the ancient homeland of his ancestors. But ironically, this journey eventually brings us right back to where the story actually began, Carthage. And here in Carthage, we hit a massive ideological clash. Smitten by the machinations of the goddesses Venus, who, by the way, is Aeneas' mother, and Juno, who are essentially treating these mortals like reality TV contestants, Queen Dido falls hopelessly, deeply in love with Aeneas. They kick off this passionate affair, and for a brief moment, Aeneas just forgets his fate. He lingers in Carthage, acting almost like a co-ruler, and comes dangerously close to abandoning his divine mission for earthly love. But Jupiter, the king of the gods, is absolutely not having it. He dispatches his messenger, Mercury, to give Aeneas a very harsh reality check. Aeneas is abruptly reminded of his absolute duty to his future descendants, and he's forced to pack up and leave Carthage in secret. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Virgil uses this romantic tragedy for sheer, brilliant political utility. Devastated and betrayed by Aeneas sneaking away, Dido actually commits suicide on a massive funeral pyre. But right before she dies, she lays this horrifying curse on Aeneas, swearing that their descendants will be at war forever. For Virgil's Roman audience back in the day, this was a masterful piece of storytelling. It retroactively provided a mythical, deeply personal justification for the very real, very bloody Punic Wars that Rome fought against Carthage centuries later. Let's move to Section 3, Visions of the Underworld, and see how this builds. Leaving the earthly drama of Carthage completely behind, Aeneas must look beyond the mortal realm to truly understand his purpose. Because before he can even think about settling down in Italy, Aeneas has to consult the dead. Guided by a powerful prophetess known as the Sibyl of Cumae, Aeneas physically descends into the underworld, specifically to this dark, cavernous region called Avernus. He undertakes this absolutely terrifying journey with one primary goal in mind: to find the spirit of his father, Anchises. This reunion is hands down the pivotal turning point of the entire epic. It fundamentally shifts Aeneas' core motivation from being just a reluctant survivor to becoming a resolute, determined founder. But why is it so pivotal? Well, because down in the underworld, Anchises doesn't just offer some warm, fatherly advice, he literally reveals the souls of the men waiting to be born. Aeneas watches this incredible parade of the future glory of Rome, the great generals, the statesmen, and, very importantly, Emperor Augustus himself. Remember, Virgil is writing this during Augustus's actual reign, so this scene, it is pure, unadulterated political propaganda, brilliantly woven right into the myth. It retroactively glorifies the leaders of Rome, telling Aeneas, and the reader, honestly, that all his agonizing suffering is absolutely necessary to bring about this magnificent, preordained future. Which brings us to our next section, War for a New Home. Bolstered by this massive vision, Aeneas finally reaches Latium in central Italy. But listen, if you thought the struggle was over, you are sorely mistaken. The pace of the story accelerates super aggressively here. The quest for peace is about to be completely drowned in blood. At first glance, things actually look incredibly promising. Aeneas seeks a peaceful settlement. The local ruler, King Latinus, is this wise man who has already received signs that a foreign hero is fated to marry his daughter, Lavinia. Recognizing Aeneas as his prophesied hero, Latinus eagerly steps up, offering an alliance and his daughter's hand in marriage. It sounds perfect, right? But this peaceful integration is completely shattered before it can even begin. Enter Turnus. Turnus is the fierce leader of a local tribe called the Rutuli, and crucially, he was the guy previously betrothed to Lavinia. The goddess Juno, still absolutely hating the Trojans, sees a golden opportunity here. She infects Turnus with a supernatural, maddening rage over this foreign intrusion. Whipped into a frenzy, Turnus rallies the Latin forces, rises up against the Trojans, and plunges the entire region into a massive, catastrophic war. Completely outnumbered, Aeneas has to leave his camp to seek out local allies. During this time, his mother Venus intervenes yet again. She persuades the god of fire and the forge, Vulcan, to craft divine, impenetrable armor for her son. And the centerpiece of this armor is just a magnificent shield. Beautifully, the face of this shield is intricately carved with scenes depicting the glorious future history of Rome. Once again, Virgil brilliantly bridges the gap between ancient myth and Roman reality. Aeneas is literally carrying the weight and the future of Rome on his arm as he marches into battle. Final section, the price of empire. So, the crucial point is, as we enter the epic climax of the story, Virgil forces us to really confront the horrific realities and the massive, devastating cost of empire building. The war in Italy is incredibly fierce and shockingly costly. We witness two completely tragic losses here. First is Pallas, a young, brave ally of Aeneas who is ruthlessly killed by Turnus in battle. The death of Pallas just shatters Aeneas, driving him into this absolute frenzy of grief and vengeance. Then, on the opposing side, we have Camilla. She's a fierce, heroic warrior maiden fighting for Turnus, and her tragic death just further escalates the brutal stakes of the conflict. All of this personal fury building up within Aeneas is perfectly setting the stage for an inevitable, explosive final showdown. And the entire epic culminates right here in a dramatic one-on-one duel between Aeneas and Turnus. Aeneas finally strikes Turnus down. Wounded and defeated, Turnus actually begs for his life. And for a fleeting moment, Aeneas hesitates. He really considers showing mercy. But then, his eyes fall upon Turnus's shoulder. Turnus is wearing the stolen sword belt of the young slain Pallas as a battle trophy. Seeing this, Aeneas is consumed by a blinding, righteous wrath. He abandons all thoughts of mercy, plunges his sword into Turnus's chest, ending his life in a furious act of revenge, and finally securing the land for Rome. And that is where the epic abruptly ends, right on that dark, violent note, which leaves us with an incredibly powerful question to ponder. Does this ruthless ending suggest that the true foundation of the Roman Empire was built on brutal, inescapable violence, rather than just high-minded divine destiny? Virgil gives Rome its grand origin story, absolutely, but he doesn't hide the blood soaked into the soil to build it. It's a morally complex, frankly shocking finale that makes the Aeneid a true masterpiece. Think about that as you continue to explore classical history, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.